We all can fall victim to our temptations to be negative about everything, so today I'm going to do something to combat that by saying one positive thing about every ATP top 50 player. And in the 50th is David Goffin. Up until the US Open it looked like this will be a sad ending to Goffin's career. The man was barely in the top 100, was losing matches that he probably shouldn't have, and in general it felt like he was stagnating, but then the Shanghai Masters came where he played pretty well and now he is in the top 50, which is great for someone who looked down and out for the majority of the season. Next one up is Marcos Giron, and it might sound like a crazy positive, but I have no idea how is he even here. Marcos had 13 first round exits throughout the season and some way, somehow he's still a top 50 player, which means that there are weeks where he can lock in and get those necessary points in order to stay in the mix of the ATP tour. In 48th is Jakub Menchik. I mean, the guy is 19 and he's 2-0 against top 10 players like Grigor Dimitrov and Andrei Rublev this season. The talent is undeniably there, and that is why he did gain 109 places in the rankings in comparison to where he started the season. But the most obvious positive is that the climb up the rankings is not stopping here. Honestly, this was a pretty average season for Triple Z, as the Rome and Halle results are hard carrying him in terms of rankings, but I guess considering the talent that Zhizhen Zheng possesses, he is not going to play worse next season, and that's a plus. Next one up is Roberto Bautista Agut, and his positive is very similar to David Goffin, but RBA actually got a title this season, so which the only reaction could be is how? But kudos to him for playing great tennis at the end of the season. We found a new clay court merchant and his name is Mariano Navone, and subjectively that's not something that I'm a fan of, but objectively that is a great way as to how to stay relevant on the tour, so you do you, Mariano. Next up is Alex Michelsen, and earning $1 million for a 50% win season is awesome, but that's all I have, to be honest. In 43rd is Luciano Darderi. He retired Dominic Thiem, and it doesn't matter how it made you feel as a fan, but he was a part of a historic event. Next one up is Jan-Lennard Struff, and Jan finally got his first ATP title at the age of 34, and that's just a proof that it's never too late to do something special. Just outside the top 40 is Pedro Martinez, and I genuinely have no idea how's he that high in the rankings, but kudos to Pedro for taking advantage of the system. Shout out to Thomas Echeverry for becoming a better hardcore player than he was, because prior to this year he was fulfilling the Mariano Navone role on the tour, and honestly speaking that's not the most fun role to play. Tallon Griekspoor is probably the most consistent player on the tour, and what I mean by that is that he never goes below his expected level, but at the same time he rarely overachieves, so he stays true to his abilities on the tennis court. Matteo Arnaldi had multiple round of 16 or better results at the big tournaments this year, which is not something super special, but considering his season win-loss record, it's kind of surprising that he was able to pull off solid results at some of the most important tournaments of the year. In 37th is Nicolas Jarry. It is hard to find positives for someone who suffered 15 first round losses this season, but the final of the Rome Masters helped him salvage the season, so I guess he at least had one great tournament this year. Next up is Matteo Berrettini, and in March Berrettini was in 154th place in the rankings, but then he went on to produce the best season of his career. Titles wise, he climbed up 100 spots in the rankings throughout the season, and he did all of that whilst only competing in 15 tournaments in total. Because of his low ranking at the start of the season, he got awful draws at the tournaments where the most points were at play, so it just means that we need a healthy Berrettini season, because if we get one, then I'm sure that he will be at least a top 20 player again. Brandon Nakashima is someone who proved me wrong this season. I felt like he will be a perpetual borderline top 100 player in the world, but he was able to produce good results on grass and on the American soil, so I just have to respect players who make me eat my words. It was unfortunate that Nuno Borges got injured after a great US Open campaign, but Nuno is well on his way to becoming the greatest Portuguese tennis player ever, so that's something that he can definitely look forward to. Shout out to Alexander Bublik for somehow still staying relevant by producing a single solid title run whilst being average the whole season. In 32nd is Flavio Cobolli, and one big big positive for Flavio is that he's a solid player on all the surfaces, so he's always a threat to anyone he plays. And the guy was outside of the top 100 at the start of the season, so 70 spot climb up the rankings is something commendable as well. Before I start praising the big guy Giovanni Pecci Pericard, I want to be a bit annoying and praise myself for saying this at the end of April when Gio was outside of the top 100. Who is a player outside of the top 50 that you could see come into the top this year? You know, everyone can say like someone like João Fonseca, who is unbelievable talent for his age, but I'll go for someone who you will not expect, and it's Giovanni Pecci Pericard. Most of you probably are saying, who the is that guy? And I can understand you, but I think that he can become the next serve bot in the top 50. His serve is unbelievable, you can barely see the ball when he serves. Obviously his rally tolerance should be worked on, but if he does that, then I can see him becoming a top 50 player this year. In Basel, Gio went on probably the most unexpected title run since Simon Reithoven in Hertogenbosch, but before that he already won a title in Lyon on clay, so Gio has the potential to become the next great serve bot on the tour. And you can hate it or love it, but as they say, game's the game. In 30th is Jiří Lehečka, and it would be easy to compare him to Tomáš Berdych, but I won't, cause Jiří just feels like a Karen Khachanov regen. The man is super consistent, solid on all surfaces, never faced by his opposition. I mean, what more can you ask for from a player? I guess Francisco Cerundolo won a title in Umag where he beat Rublev and Musetti, but in general that was a pretty forgettable season for Francisco. Next up is Jordan Thompson, and reaching your career high at the age of 30, beating Zverev and Ruud on the road to your first career title and winning a doubles Grand Slam title just sounds like a dream season for someone who has been a fringe top 50 player the last few years. Following Thompson is Felix Auger-Aliassime. Runs at Madrid Masters and the Olympics showed that Felix shouldn't be written off just yet. He is still very talented, and at the age of 24 there is still time to turn things around. In 26th is Sebastian Baez, winning 2 titles and staying in the top 30 for the whole season, considering that his game is pretty limited to one surface is wild. Don't see him keeping this up for much longer, but whilst he does it, he deserves acknowledgement. I do not want to show recency bias when I talk about Tomáš Machač, but just last month the guy beat Carlos Alcaraz and went toe-to-toe with Jannik Sinner, so the future is obviously bright for the 24-year-old from Czechia. In 24th is Alexei Popyrin, and I don't know how this guy won a Masters tournament, but he did, and that's cool. Not sure if this level is sustainable for him though. Next one up is Sebastian Korda, and obviously needing an elbow surgery is very unfortunate, but right before the injury he was finally finding his game again. Solid grass court season if we ignore Wimbledon where he faced Pecci Pericard in the first round, which is a nightmare draw on grass. Title in Washington, semis in Montreal are all good indication that Sebi is still a scary opponent to play against. Alejandro Tabilo started off the season incredibly. A title in Auckland, final in Santiago, a win over Novak Djokovic, title on grass in Mallorca, and all of those positives overpower the negatives of the end of the season. Karen Khachanov is just unbelievably consistent with his ranking, and that's something that not many can be proud of. In 20th we have Artur Fils. We have Mr. 250, Casper Ruud, big tournament players like Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. And now we also have Mr. 500, Artur Fils. The guy becomes a different player the ATP 500 tournaments. And if he can lock in for those now, maybe the next season he will be on to bigger and better things. There is so much upside for Ben Shelton, but at the same time there is so many things that he can improve on in the future, and even considering that he's still a top 20 player in the world, so the sky is the limit for this guy. Previously I called Khachanov Mr. Consistency, but Ugo Umberg is here to fight for that title, cause this guy's ranking graph didn't move a single bit this season. Ugo has been very solid this whole season, and for me he is the dark horse to win Paris Masters. Frances Tiafoe still runs the US, finals in Cincy, semi-finals at the US Open, and you can say what you want about Francis, but you can count on him delivering during the US Open swing. Lorenzo Musetti finally started playing tennis that everyone expected from him when everybody was touting him as the next big thing in tennis after his successful juniors career. Lorenzo feels like a veteran of the tour at the age of 22, which is also kinda wild, and who knows what he will be able to do when he actually reaches his prime. Apart from the obvious fact that Jack Draper is an unbelievably talented tennis player, I'm happy to see that his fitness is actually improving. Yes, it's still not great, but in comparison to what we saw last year, this is a huge improvement and a step in the right direction in order to become a top 10 player in the world. It feels like Hubie Hurkacz has been injured or playing through injury for at least half of the season, so the fact that he's still in the top 50 is mind-boggling. There is no denying that this was not the best season for Holger Rune, but at least in the last few weeks it seems like more structure has been brought to his team and his play on the court, which makes me hopeful for the next season. Whenever I see that Sami Paul is about to play a big name, I instantly get happy because I know that we are in for a banger. I genuinely feel like Sami is in the top 5 of the most entertaining players on tour, because the man has the ability to be competitive against anybody. Just outside the top 10 is Stefanos Tsitsipas, and I guess he found the love of his life this year, and that's all that matters. In my opinion, Alex de Minaur is the biggest overachiever in tennis right now. It doesn't feel like he should be a top 10 player, but through hard work and determination he deservedly is, and that is why I hope that he will take the final spot in the ATP finals. The career renaissance that started for Grigor Dimitrov at the end of the last year continued in 2024. The game is still as beautiful as ever, and I could watch his matches every day, and as a tennis fan, it's the best compliment one can give. I want to be like Casper Ruud, to be honest, because it feels like he does the absolute least one can do to stay in the elite group of players, and that is just admirable. Honestly, a pretty forgettable season for Andrei Rublev in general, but one thing that stuck with me is him winning the Madrid Masters, where he beat Alcaraz, Fritz, and Ogielia's team was being really sick. And as someone who is not a huge fan of Rublev, I still have to respect the determination that he showed that week in Madrid. And 6th is Taylor Fritz, and you know what, this one was the most difficult one for me, cause he did have a great season, but I don't remember anything that stood out apart from him getting into his first major final, so I need help from you all in the comment section down below. Next up is Daniil Medvedev, and thank you for the memes, I guess, but you for the constant Sinner Medvedev matches, they suck. Novak Djokovic achieved his career goal that kinda seemed out of reach at this point at the Olympics this year, and with that he solidified himself as statistically the greatest player of all time. I think that was exactly what Novak wanted from this season. Alexander Zverev didn't go to jail, so that's good for him. Even in a season where Jannik Sinner was dominant, Carlos Alcaraz still stayed as the main star of the tour and kinda overshadowed Jannik by matching him in the Grand Slams one and beating him in every single match they played this season. And last but not least, Jannik Sinner. What is there to say that hasn't been said? Jannik produced one of the most dominant seasons in recent memory, became the greatest Italian tennis player of all time, reached the #1 spot in the rankings, and in general it was just an ideal season for the year-end #1 Jannik Sinner. Feel free to join me in saying something positive about the players in the comment section down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, take it easy, my friend.